So when it comes to marketing, Dennis, it's something that absolutely I'm heard of, but in terms of from an expertise perspective, I have to be the first to admit it's one of those things that I'm confounded by a lot of times. I don't really understand the science of marketing, and I'm not really good at that. But what's your perspective on marketing?
Yeah, it's one of those ones, I've worked for, large corporations and I mean, marketing's huge, especially, Frito and some of these others. As I got into my small business and started, it probably wasn't as high of importance to me. Um, but I know it plays a role because there's steps to it. And a lot of times it just gets all lumped together, but there's different phases of what's happening in their strategies around it. And we all live it. I mean, as consumers, we see it and feel it. As business owners, you've got to have some of it, but do we really know what to do with it and how to do it effectively?
We have today Doug Belding, who is the founder of DLB Creative, come and stop by today and really educate us about marketing. And really, I really appreciate Doug's perspective. Somebody who really has a passion, is creative about this, and really scientifically, you can tell there's a lot of thought in terms of his approach to marketing. And one thing too, I thought, Dennis, that my logo was going to be like a number one, two thing of importance for me. But I have to admit, Doug blew my mind when he told us what the number one thing is. And so that's a little bit of teaser for you guys to listen to what it is. But this is it surprised me what's really important when it comes to marketing. So let's have a listen to what Doug has to say about marketing.
WFH with two guys. Now here's Benny and Dennis.
Dennis, marketing is such an important part for companies that I think I really haven't been able to dissect what marketing means necessarily for my company. Maybe you've done a lot more so with you. I know you and I have talked about things from a creative perspective, but I really think that probably there's a lot I'm missing when it comes to this marketing stuff.
It is one that I have to be honest, mine has not probably been the best either. It's evolved. I know, for me, starting out as a new business owner 14 years ago, just getting a website was the big thing, and then figuring out what our logo was going to look like and all that. And it's evolved. But I know, you know, for big companies, small companies, it's an important piece because that's how your customers see you. So it's really, really important.
Yeah, so it's important that we bring on the experts instead of you and I just talking in a
You
vacuum.
bet.
So, Doug, thanks for coming on the show today and helping us figure this stuff out.
Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it, guys.
Absolutely. We talked a little bit before we started recording here, and I was really fascinated with this thought. The idea of brand, creative, and marketing strategy are all very different. Okay. And I have to admit, I kind of put it all in one big bucket of stuff when it comes to marketing. But you kind of touched on it. I really want to dive deep a little bit into what this all means. Can you talk a little bit about that and what this all means?
Yeah, 100%. I appreciate the opportunity to kind of break it down because I think to your point, I definitely work with a lot of companies that's thrown into one bucket and probably an understaffed team of people doing it,
Mm.
which really, can be a bit of a disservice and may not have the time to accurately do it. But, thinking about how one flows into the other, like brand strategy, for example, that's really kind of your long-term blueprint of how your company wants to be perceived and what that stands for. And sometimes people jump the gun on that, like what's really your purpose and what's your positioning, what's your company values,
Mm.
what's the personality of that company. And, sometimes owners feel that their personality is the personality of the company, and that's really not ideal, especially come time for sale. Uh,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
really, what's the promise to your clients and your customers? What are you kind of delivering? So, a really great example of that is Patagonia, if you're familiar with them.
Hmm.
And like what's their slogan? We're the outdoor company that protects the planet. and they give
Right.
1% donations to environmental causes to kind of really back that up. So really, your brand is your why. Why are we in the market? Why are we showing up, and
Mm.
who are we helping, kind of thing.
From to kind of extend beyond that, and we as we talk about that, and obviously when you said Patagonia, it's funny because I started thinking about like some of the images of some of the, and not necessarily any one campaign, but I automatically think about outdoors, and I automatically think about like you said, here in Colorado, it's they're very big, obviously, and so I those things kind of come to mind. And with Nike, another image comes to mind. I think of somebody, I'm a runner, and I think about somebody who's like sprinting and competing in the Olympics and those type of things. From that perspective, how does that really work with creative? Tell me a little bit about you know. When I kind of put all that together, I'm trying to differentiate in my mind. Now I got an idea of what brand looks like. What does creative strategy look like?
That's a great question. So really from there, you kind of get your big idea and what's your guiding concept for that brand story,
Mm,
to make sure it's just expressed, visually and verbally. So, the messaging themes, the look and feel, the tone of voice, and kind of the campaign concepts that go with that.
mm-hmm,
So like you mentioned Nike, like Nike's Just Do It. It's a single creative strategy that, really kind of drives that photography, look and feel, the copywriting, the design across decades now. I mean, been a long going campaign.
mm.
So it's really, how are they showing up, and taking that brand's DNA into those different experiences and those visuals, and those words. So great pick on Nike.
Doug, so I mean, in the past couple of years, we've had a few brands kind of botch. I'm going to call it the creative part. I mean, Bud Light is a great example. Yeah, I'm sure that'll be a casebook study for somebody at some point in the future to look back. I mean, what happened there? I mean, what was going on that would cause something like that to happen? And are there ways to create guardrails for companies to avoid that disaster in the future?
Were you saying Cracker Barrel?
Cracker Barrel's another good one. So I mean,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
you got Cracker Barrel recently. You got Bud Light. I mean, you've got several different ones that radically shifted around. Those are bigger companies. For
Yeah.
smaller ones, they're nimbler and they can flex quicker. Big ones, when they go that way, they're kind of stuck for a while. Cracker Barrel seems to have kind of flipped back, but
They did, yeah, and Jaguar is another one. Like they
yeah,
did a big revamp, and that had a reaction. I think honestly, it really comes down to communication. If you kind of look at, you know what Cracker Barrel attempted to do in terms of doing brand and a creative and look and feel, if you go deeper into what they actually produced, there's definitely a strategy there. It wasn't, you
right.
know, a lot of people's initial reaction was, well, it's just another super clean, modern looking logo that doesn't really tell me anything. Um, and that's valid. They took away a lot of their distinct brand elements. Like it actually said it was an old general store. Well, if you've never been to a Crackle Barrel before and you're driving by and you just see that logo, you would think, well, they sell barrels and crackers. I don't know why. And it's like they took away their rocking chairs, they took away the barrel, and it just didn't feel like someone who had never experienced it, that it was a restaurant or
Mm,
a place to stop in. And realistically, it's one of those nostalgic brands where like you go there because that's where grandma took you. You don't go there because it's the new cool hip spot. Um, I think that's kind of maybe a mark that was missed a little bit, and I think they could have met somewhere in the middle and been more well received. But it's just really kind of it wasn't rolled out and effectively spoken to the end users, I think, in a way that felt that they were included in that.
I would say, I mean, that's the key pieces. I mean, because I've worked for companies. I mean, usually they do all kinds of market studies, and I mean, you try to get people from all different walks of life. It looks, and so I would think one of the guardrails is make sure that your team that you're working with isn't all looking at the world the same way. It's actually probably positive to have challenges and people to debate of, hey, I like light, I like dark, I like, new, I like old. and have
Yeah.
that conversation, because if everybody thinks it's all going to be one way, the world's probably not going to give you the results that you're looking for on that creative side.
I agree. I think it's really, one way I always like to work is everyone has a voice and everyone has room to kind of share that. And I think it's just really important to get those points of views and those conversations going, because um, how do you know what's going on in anyone else's life? Really, we're always in our own heads so much that it's like you assume too much sometimes.
And I think, as the owner of the company, you've got to step back and take some of your personality or your thoughts out of it. Because again, I've worked at somewhere it didn't matter what we told them and provided data points, that owner was going to do it his or her way. And it was like, you're setting yourself up for failure because we're telling you that the marketplace isn't going to like this.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the one we're talking about here, Cracker Barrel, with the marketing strategy is kind of where maybe they didn't kind of follow a plan like this, but really it's just kind of like reaching those audiences. Like, did they choose the right channels? Did they think about budget? Because I remember hearing afterwards, the owner was like, "Well, you just burnt through $700 million that I'm not going to get back." What's the timing of that? Is there something they could wrap it around, like a anniversary or something? What are the KPIs? And to your point, the audience and the promotion. So maybe it could have been a warmer lead up to that.
Yeah.
And if it had been, people weren't resonating with it, it would seem, because the backlash was just so intense.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then on the other side, for business owners, it's okay to make some changes. If you keep doing the same
100%.
thing over and over again, it does become stale. You've got to introduce things. Change. I mean, things in the world change, events change, dates happen, things happen. We were talking before we jumped on, knowing that in 2026, the U.S. is going to be celebrating 250th anniversary. You can start seeing already some of the commercials are beginning to introduce a little bit more red, white, and blue, a little more patriotism,
Yeah.
because they probably know that it's going to happen, because 4th of July is going to come and it's going to be a big deal next year. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for that, like really, we were kind of talking about this before we jumped on. It's kind of how the brand and creative, the marketing strategies kind of build a house. Your brand strategy is really your foundation, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, like, those brands probably aren't going to deviate, but their creative strategy, is more or less the design and the look and feel. So that might change for this particular upcoming year. And then of course the marketing strategy is like, how are you going to throw this 4th of July party kind of thing? What channels are you going to put that out there? And that might change for this year. But like, those companies' brand DNA isn't necessarily shifting. They're just, celebrating a particular moment and time. And to your point, it's really okay to change your creative and marketing strategy. That's a landscape, particularly in marketing, that's just ever evolving, especially with AI and social channels and the expansion of social channels and things like that. So where do you really show up? And one thing I'm connecting with a lot of other marketers and creative folks is seeing a shift in marketing, as it's been the past few years, has really shifted. It's far less about spending, on ads and things like that. I'm seeing a big shift, and people are investing in their brand and really kind of getting back to that and realizing, like, we can't be everywhere all the time, but where we are needs to be more consistent and more reliable and more relatable.
Let me ask you, since you were just talking about brand and whatnot, brands for big companies like Patagonia and Nike, we were just talking about before, but in terms of small companies, a lot of us are small business owners,
Yep.
medium-sized business owners. We certainly aren't household names. We aren't necessarily recognized with all that. How important is brand for the small business, and is it even necessary?
I think it's more important. And but the beautiful thing about it is you don't have that legacy understanding that you can be more nimble. You have more room to kind of play a bit. Some of the big brands we talked about played a little bit and
Mhm.
didn't go so well. But I think the thing is like, companies start out and you often hear, or I often hear, my nephew, my cousin, my uncle, whoever helped with the website and the logo and whatever. But, they're not, which is all great. And I imagine it could be a beautiful asset. However, they're probably not thinking about all these strategies we're talking about here of how to kind of go to market and how it makes sense and what's tied into what and what leads to the next thing. No fault of their own. It's not probably their world. They might just be a really great illustrator or really love UX design. So I think that's okay for those to evolve and really kind of understand. But like, if you want to stand out, being a smaller or mid-sized business, well, what a great spot to be, because you don't have all that red tape, you don't have all legal, and you can pivot much more quickly and much more effectively, really, provided you have the right partners to kind of help you see through that. And I see that a lot in like mergers and acquisitions. So
Mm-hmm.
you think of those companies that are maybe 2 years out, they know they want to sell. It's kind of like selling a used car, like a little wax and a wash will get you a couple extra grand, hopefully. So
Yeah.
if you have that time, maybe that company hasn't rebranded or changed their strategies for a decade. Well,
Mm-hmm.
the three of us probably love that campaign they had, and that's why we all bought in. But maybe 10 years have gone by and we don't really resonate with that tone of voice anymore.
Mm-hmm.
um, what would re-excite us again? So kind of coming up with some strategies of that way to get people excited. But then maybe there's 10 years of people who just didn't know about your product or your services that
Yeah.
you could re-engage as well. Therefore, fattening up your books for when you go to market, you have a new look and feel. You can charge a lot more money when you want to go to for sale. So I think there's a
Yeah.
lot of opportunity with the business side for sure, of like why brand's important, and even including things like distinct brand assets. Like I work with a really great Sonic brander who you think of things like Netflix and it comes on, it's like dun dun. You don't
Yeah.
have to be watching the TV to know that's the Netflix logo
Oh
and that's
yeah.
coming on. Or
Mm-hmm.
if you're watching a movie and you flip the laptop up and it has the Mac sound, you don't see the
Mm-hmm.
logo, but distinctively, like, oh, they're using a Mac, and it's all
That's interesting.
subconscious. So really kind of building those assets out. And one thing that's I find really interesting, it's you kind of look at about brand, what resonates most, and it's strangely audio. Then it's celebrity endorsements or influencer endorsements.
Hmm.
Logo is like eighth, and people get so hung up and they're like, oh, my logo isn't perfect, and it doesn't. My logo needs to tell everything I do. And
Right.
your logo can change every year if you want it to. Like
Yeah.
it really, it shouldn't, but it can.
Right. Oh
But
gosh.
it's not as important as people kind of put on. But it is absolutely important. But it's interesting of what resonates with people. It's not one of the top five. It's just outside of that.
Interesting.
Yeah. That's fascinating. Yeah. I mean, when you said that, I actually was thinking, oh yeah, the Intel, the Intel sound,
Yeah,
that's yeah, everyone knows that. And, well, I'm a technology guy, so I'm gonna have to ask the obligatory technology question here.
sure.
And Dennis is probably knowing what I'm going to ask, but AI has obviously infiltrated every aspect of our lives.
Yeah.
How has it affected marketing? Is it a good thing, bad thing? What is your perspective on AI in your world?
Um, I'd have a hard time doing what I do without it.
No.
I really took a deep dive into it. Probably, I mean, it seems crazy to say, 2.5 years ago, but that's when I really first got into it, being like, oh, what's this concept that we could look like for a proposal? Even like, what do these characters look right? Instead of sketching it out and spending all that time, could we prompt these things? And you look back and they're horribly ugly, but at the time it was pretty cool, even though it was only a couple of years ago.
Hmm.
But that really kind of evolved into like, oh, this can really help me set up systems and programs to um, come up with brand concepts. And people were really excited about seeing you work.
Yeah.
How often before, like Dennis, I don't know, when you went through your branding exercise, it probably took 6 months, I would guess, at that point, with back and forth and agreements and all
Yeah.
that. I'm finding that's 6 weeks now.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Because people um, are using it more themselves too, like clients are. So like they have ideas and they know, and they can articulate them better. Because they have the help of these tools to kind of show it. Um, I'm using vibe coding a lot just for concepts of like,
Mm.
here's an interface. How can we improve it? What's this look and feel? Honestly, one thing I've been doing lately is I've just been under so many NDAs from projects gone by. I've kind of been taking Taylor Swift's lead and like reworking projects I've created a few years back, vibe coding them. So not to, they're not seeing what the final product was, but in all honesty, they look better and they function better, and I'm able to do it in a day or so, where it took us months. Mind you, it's not fully tied up to the back end and all that,
Right.
but it's a working prototype to kind of show that. So most case studies in the past were like, here's some photos of the interface we built and here's a description. So I think having that ability for people to play with it is really powerful.
And I would think
Yeah.
also just coming up with ideas. I mean, we've talked about other areas that it's like you can throw something out to it. Chat GPT will come back with, say, 25 different ideas. Then you and the team can start whittling down, okay, what really resonates with what we do and how we do things. Um,
Yeah,
where before you would spend weeks and months trying to come up with ideas, and sometimes you wouldn't even get all of them. And this way, it just speeds up the process. It doesn't take the human intervention out of what's going to happen,
agreed.
but it speeds up. If you were the person doing the creative, coming up with the ideas, you probably are getting questioned. But if you're the one that's saying, hey, now let's figure out, okay, how we're going to do something with this idea,
Hmm.
then you've got Chat GPT or those AI tools to help you kind of figure out where to go with it, which I think is cool. And I've always,
Certainly. Yeah. I mean, I'm working on a project now with a client, and like without my meeting recording, like I would miss things, and it's so important
Oh,
because we're
yeah.
actually going through this of like, what's the brand
right.
strategy, then the creative strategy, and the marketing strategy for this. I mean, I can't afford to miss any of those details.
Yep.
Um, but having those details allows me to go riff on it later to be like, what kind of concepts could we really flush out? What could be a great delight? What's a differentiator?
Yep.
So, and then all those tools flow into like operations and marketing and, for me, creative, and then like proposals and things like that. So yeah, it's a big differentiator for businesses for
Yeah.
sure.
Awesome.
Let me ask. I want to switch gears on you for a second here. From again, we talked about this before we start recording. I thought this was interesting. um, Different cultures when it
Hmm.
comes to marketing, right? For some of us, maybe we are strictly and firmly planted here in North America, maybe even just the U.S. and maybe just regional, right? But when we kind of venture out into different markets, and especially if you're looking at expanding internationally,
Yeah.
there's a lot of things that and you and Dennis actually brought up a couple things that I didn't even consider. Can you talk a little bit about that? For what does that mean for a company, and when they kind of look at other cultures, other worlds to expand into?
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And I think for me early on in my career, one of my first jobs was in Singapore, which was really amazing because I was a minority and I was surrounded by so many different amazing cultures there. I think it kind of helped me, change that point of view. Um, and realistically, I think you just need to do a lot of research on that. Like I
Mm,
think I was mentioning before, some courses and products we've built before in the past. Um, for languages, it needs to read right to left in some cultures as opposed to left to right. So designing UI and UX for that experience. Dennis, you had mentioned color is very important in different cultures, and understanding those relationships with those. So color theory in North America could be very different than the Middle East or Asia. So, to that point, I think if you can connect with someone in that area who's actually in brand and marketing, reach out on LinkedIn. It's so easy to get connected now, and just kind of ask them, be like, hey, I'm looking to enter your marketplace. Any insights that I should, be aware of or know about?
Yeah.
I would be pretty hard to believe people wouldn't be like, sure. I mean, why not? It's not a weird ask. It's actually kind of nice.
Yeah, no, and I think, and even, if you're going from the US overseas or coming to the US, I mean, even in the US, there's regional slang and words that mean slightly different things. I mean, in the North, they call it what, pop, and in the South, it was soda. And, those types of things. And I mean, we laugh at it, but
Yeah.
I mean, that determines kind of how you market things, because in one area they're gonna like, I don't have a clue what you're talking about, or it's a negative, and the other it's like, okay, this is great. And so you got to be careful of thinking that one thing fits all. And I know that's, to me, is what's really cool with AI, that you can begin to create what used to be a brand market strategy for the whole US. Now you can get very, very specific, even to states. I mean, think about all the, like Regions Bank, I think they're the sponsor of the SEC football. Well, I
Hmm.
guarantee when they're advertising in Nashville, it probably has Tennessee or Vanderbilt's logo, but when they're in Atlanta, it's showing Georgia's logo.
Right.
Where before that probably took hours and hours to figure that out. Now with AI, it probably just does it really fast and quick. And so those are just different things that, as you're thinking how you're going to market, you've got to get a plan and be ready for it.
No, it's very true. And even locally, to your point, I would agree. I've worked with, like CVS in the past, and their branding's red, very, very red focused. And the product we are working on was kind of sensitive, and could potentially use some troubleshooting at the wee hours of the night. Red's not a great color when someone's been woken up and needs to fix something. So,
Hmm.
we're like, we're going to use the white version of your logo, some muted colors, and, soften this a lot.
Yeah,
But, it's just even, within the US, you still kind of find some
yeah,
of those issues.
that's cool.
We talked about a lot of topics, and marketing, it really is, it's one of those, yeah, I don't know. It's a very big thing that I don't know much about, but it's super important business. I feel I always try to get 1% smarter. So I think you maybe you double that. I'm a 2% smarter today, Doug. I appreciate that. But I do also know that there are going to be people out there who do have questions about marketing and understanding the difference between brand and creative and all the other aspects of that. But um, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you? And what's yeah, talk a little bit about DLB Creative.
Sure, I appreciate it. Yeah, I think a good summary on this would probably be, brand strategy equals your why. Your creative strategy equals your how, your idea and your expression. And the marketing strategy is, the where and when, what's your tactics and measurements. So just kind of keeping those at a high level, understanding where they flow, I think is probably helpful for folks. In terms of getting in contact, you can definitely reach out at www.dlb-creative.com. What we offer there is quite a few services, really. So interactive workshops, we do that a lot for AI or branding. Um, Creative leadership, I come on as a fractional chief creative officer as needed when needed. Really kind of cuts the cost of having someone in that role full time, but
Mm-hmm.
allows me to be quite nimble and bring in solutions from other areas. Within there, we have a variety of brand packages for businesses at different stages of their growth. And then also, I'd love to do stuff like this, like get on podcasts
Yeah.
or talk on panels and things like that. And happy to be a guest and share a couple decades of knowledge that way. And then we've been building out a fun tool that incorporates some AI aspects, but really doing brand audits so companies can kind of see a snapshot of where they are currently right now. And within that, a lot of times that falls under marketing, but I really wanted to spread that out across the C-suite. So we've added in things like what's your brand readiness for mergers and acquisition, or funding if you're looking for funding,
Yep.
or how are you showing up in AI searches, and SWOT analysis, and kind of benchmarking all that for people. So um, really been fun to kind of build that out and offer that services to people as well.
Fantastic. Doug Belding, DLB Creative, thank you so much for stopping by today. We appreciate it. Definitely learned a little bit more about the unique aspects of marketing.
I appreciate it, Benny. I appreciate it, Dennis. I
Yeah.
really appreciate your time.
Thanks.
Absolutely. Thanks again.
Thank you.
You've been listening to WFH with Two Guys. We'll see you next time.